Hey, thank you. Hi, everybody. So first of all, thank you for coming here today. I know there's a lot going on. I know it's like a holiday weekend and there's this basketball tournament thing happening with, I don't know, maybe some local favorite team participating in it. So thanks a lot for coming out. This is so important that you're here. As Sarah mentioned, I'm a Pitt graduate. I graduated in 1984. I left the city of Pittsburgh and shortly thereafter, and I've only been back for visits ever since, but I've written 2 books that were set here. The city is very important to me, and when I realized that the Pennsylvania primary was going to be important, was going to turn out to matter, I felt like I wanted to do something to try to come here to Pittsburgh and see if I could help in any way. So here I am. I came all the way from Berkeley, California on a red eye. I got in at 7 o'clock this morning just because Pittsburgh is so important to me and Barack Obama is so important to me. And put those together and we're all here today. I know you all know, you've heard that this voter registration thing is important. It's crucial. We need this. Our great advantage is in terms of young people, students, getting out in unprecedented numbers. It's been happening all over the country. I know you know that. And it's not like that's our only hope, but that is our greatest hope. That is where our greatest hope lies for a victory here in Pennsylvania. So I know you all are already registered, right? Yeah, oh yeah. Okay. So what about like all your friends? Are they all registered already, or do you know, or do you talk about it? Is it kind of like something you guys just don't really talk about because it's a private matter, or like, do you know, are your friends registered? Have you been nagging your friends to get registered? Okay, because they only have how many more days? 2, right? Okay, so please nag them, bother them. Somebody once told me, they were giving me some advice about speaking to audiences, and they said, don't ever make the mistake of telling an audience how lucky they are. Okay, because nobody really wants to hear that they're lucky, and everybody can think of all kinds of ways in which they're not so lucky. But I can't help feeling like I envy you guys. You are lucky, and I'll tell you the way that you're lucky, because you get to have a candidate running for the president of the United States of America like Barack Obama now at your age. And I have been waiting 20 whole years, 20 plus years, longer than you have, for a candidate like this to come along. I've been waiting my whole life. I mean, I was born in 1963, so I grew up in the civil rights era. It was full swing, Vietnam. I came of age in a time when a lot of promises got made to a lot of people in this country, that there was going to be equality, there was going to be fairness, there was going to be justice, there was going to be social transformation. It was possible, it could be done, and there were people who showed the way, and there were changes that were made. But then sometimes it's felt like a lot of those promises that got made didn't get kept. Some of the promises that got made got broken, and I've been waiting for a long time to feel like maybe the time had come for some of those great promises to finally be redeemed, and I think we're all going to be the beneficiaries of that come this fall. I don't know what else I can say to you guys except thank you so much for being here, and if I don't know, it was suggested to me that maybe some of you might have like some questions you wanted to ask me, and if you do, if anybody does have a question or two, it could be like about dating, relationships, financial advice. I'm not good on like sports books, so don't ask me about point spreads or anything like that. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I want to ask you about any dating advice, but what is it about Barack Obama that I guess really turns you on for him?
That's a good question. I came of age, like I said, in this era, starting in the 70s. There was cynicism and skepticism, which I think skepticism is a very healthy thing. Cynicism sometimes can be an unhealthy thing, but in spite of the fact that I'm liberal, left-wing, progressive, come from that, third-generation labor family. I've always been very patriotic, but in a particular way, not like rah-rah, flag-waving kind of way, but with a sense that America has a greatness, and that part of its greatness is tragic greatness, but that you have to understand the entirety of America to fully be able to appreciate it. The promise of this country and the ways in which promise has not been kept. And I felt like I had never heard a politician speak in a way that seemed to me to embody that sense, that whole sense of this country, until I heard Barack Obama give his now famous keynote address in the 2004 Democratic Convention, where he just, the famous sort of takeaway line from that is, there are no red states, there are no blue states, there's just the United States. And when I couldn't believe I was hearing someone talking that way. And that was what grabbed me, like a lot of other people. And it also didn't hurt that my wife went to law school with Barack. And so she was sitting next to me and he came, I was like, that's him! That's the guy I've been telling you about, that's Barack Obama. So I went out and I got his book, his first book, which I don't know if, has anybody here, how many of you have read Dreams from My Father? Because you should, it's so good. Such a good book. It's so moving and so well written. It's such a beautiful story. His biography is so fascinating. And I just couldn't believe I had the opportunity to vote for someone for president who was also a really good writer. So that's what kind of first sold me on him. Okay. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your time. Thank you for listening to me. Tell all your friends. Thank you.
So, Zachary Quinto is here again. He's a native of Pittsburgh, and he graduated from CMU, and he's been on such shows such as 24, So Notorious, and Charmed, and he's currently Siler on Heroes, and he's not going to eat your brains out, don't worry.
Yes, I am.
All right, I'm sorry, I lied.
I'm kidding.
And he's currently filming to be Spock in the new Star Trek movie. So without any further ado, Zach Quinto.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. It's great to be back in my hometown. It's really cold, though. But that's a refreshing change from Los Angeles. So I guess I should start off by saying that if you were here yesterday, I'm going to kind of give my same presentation, so to speak, although I was just told to cut it down a little bit so it won't be as long. I'd like to begin by thanking the Obama campaign for this incredible opportunity to be here with you today, discussing the most important decision that faces each and every single one of us in what is definitely the most historic and arguably the most exciting election in the history of this great democracy. I'd also like to thank you all for coming here and for opening your minds to the man that I believe genuinely to be the only and potentially last true hope for this very wounded, very divided country. It doesn't take a political expert to look around us and recognize that we're living in dire times. The war in Iraq, an increasingly fierce and unpredictable environment, unattainable and unaffordable health care in the most powerful nation in the world, education statistics that rank us far behind many smaller, less affluent countries across the globe. Not to mention a gathering economic storm, the strength of which Alan Greenspan recently noted has not been seen since the end of World War II. And of course, how can we overlook a reputation abroad that is steeped in mistrust and alienation? We are thankfully witnessing the end of an administration that leaves behind a clear and unsettling history of recklessness, deceit, and a selfish disregard for the true heart of this country and its people. But as I see it, blame is a luxury that we cannot afford. Now is a time for courage, for hope, for change, and there's no candidate that embodies those qualities more passionately or authentically than Barack Obama. Before I left Los Angeles, a less politically minded friend pressed me as to why I decided to travel across the country in the midst of a particularly hectic schedule to lend my voice and my support to the Obama campaign. And it struck me that, for me personally, this election is not about policies or reforms or legislation as much as it's about a movement. And I'm a big believer in connectivity and the idea that our choices and actions as individuals very tangibly add up to a larger social and cultural experience. And I want my choices to help fuel the momentum of this movement. I want my actions to support the sweeping change of consciousness that is symbolized by the dynamic and historic candidacy of this visionary, dare I say, revolutionary man. His detractors love to say that voting for Barack Obama is a risk, but as I see it, from where I stand, the greatest risk is voting for anybody else. They like to say that he doesn't have as much experience as his opponents, but from where I stand, his experience is deeply rooted in humanity and compassion for the people. When he graduated from Columbia University in 1983, rather than accepting any of the number of jobs that were offered to him on Wall Street, he took a position making $13,000 a year on the south side of Chicago as a community organizer working on behalf of residents in poor neighborhoods plagued by crime and astronomical unemployment. He then went to Harvard Law School and upon graduation returned to Chicago to practice civil rights, voter rights, employment law, while simultaneously teaching constitutional law at the University of Chicago. I don't know about you, but I'm excited about the prospect of a president that has read the Constitution, understands the Constitution, obeys the Constitution, and respects it. He spent 8 years in the Illinois State Senate and 4 in the United States Senate. He has more experience than either Abraham Lincoln or FDR had when they took office, and he's the only voice of true grassroots community activism to which we as a community of Americans can turn in these very uncertain times. I, for one, am certain that Barack Obama is our hope, he is our change, he is our future. I encourage you to join in the chorus of rising voices to demand action and not just words. But in order to bring this goal to bear, you must first take action yourselves. Step 1, get involved. Obviously, Monday, March 24th is the deadline to register. I don't need to tell anybody in this room. I think everybody's registered, yes? Yes. Yes. So now, step 2, get your friends to register. Go out, go to the campaign office. We stopped there this morning in East Liberty on Highland, and you can stop in and ask how you can be put to work. I'm sure there's no shortage of chores and tasks that can be done. And engage each other in a dialogue about which issues are important to you and utilize the many tools that are at your disposal to find out where each candidate stands. But above all else, do not be silent. Instead, be the ordinary Americans that come together to make an extraordinary difference. Take back your country, take back your government, and be able to look back on this time and know that you are part of something and someone truly unique and powerful. Thank you very much for your time and for being here. I was traveling around the state earlier in the week and now in eastern and central Pennsylvania with Dule Hill and then in western Pennsylvania yesterday and today with Cal Penn. And I've really been inspired by my peers, from the entertainment industry who have actually stepped up and really made it their business to learn about this election. And I've learned so much just from the brief time that I've spent with both of those guys. So it's a real privilege for me right now to bring to you guys Cal Penn.
Oh, this is a fake microphone. That was very misleading from the back. How are you? Nice. Thank you for having us here. I will echo the sentiments of Michael and Zachary and say that it's an honor to be here. I'm really excited to see you guys all here. I'm actually a registered independent. I'll just do my disclaimer first to get it out of the way. I've probably voted for as many Democrats as Republicans as third-party candidates in my life. So sorry or you're welcome, depending on which election you're talking about. I've never done anything like this before. I've been sort of politically active, and that kind of goes back to my grandparents. Both of my grandparents from both sets of parents' sides marched with Gandhi in the Indian independence movement. And so when I was growing up, the stories that you would hear at the dinner table in our house were just about their experiences. And that didn't really have an impact on me until much later in high school or early in college when you're reading about world history and you realize the real significance and sacrifice that people have made just for me to stand here today. And so when I hear someone like Senator Obama talk about what he calls the unlikely story that is America, I think all of us, no matter what our backgrounds, can relate to that. So my involvement in this kind of goes back actually about 4 years. I was living in Texas, and a friend of mine was working a minimum wage job at a trucking company. He was the guy who at the end of the night would cut up empty boxes and put them in the recycling bin. He was making minimum wage and trying to save up money for college. And he got a phone call one day from a company called Halliburton. Do you guys know Halliburton? Straight to the laughter. Right? Sometimes you get booing and then they all laugh. So there's awareness about Halliburton. So Halliburton calls my friend and says that they would give him $90,000 for 1 year if he agreed to drive a truck in Iraq for the private sector. And he called me up and he called a couple of our other friends and he asked us what we thought he should do. And I remember thinking that it was a really sad day when the world's richest, most powerful country could only offer 2 opportunities for a friend of ours who wanted to go to college. And those 2 opportunities were minimum wage or 90 grand in a war zone. And the cynical independent side of me got a little more cynical, and I did a little research into the political system and why something like this even exists, and realized probably for the first time that for the last 20 years, we've had 2 families controlling the White House. And they've been Democrats and Republicans, and I think, quite frankly, they've had some great ideas, but they weren't able to get very much done. If they were capable of getting things done, then my friend wouldn't have to make this excruciating decision on how to pay for college. Probably about 3 weeks after this phone call, I had the television on. This was back in 2004. And the Democratic National Convention was on TV, and Senator Obama was delivering the keynote. I had it on in the background. I was checking my email, and I heard somebody say, especially after 9/11, we shouldn't be divided between blue states and red states. We should focus on being part of the United States. And I perked up and I looked at the TV and I said, all right, who is this guy with the big ears and the funny name? And why do I want him to be our next president? Obviously, from the size of this room, I was not the only one to have that thought. It wasn't a unique thought. And so 4 years later, when the senator decided to run for president, the first thing I did was look at his platform. 3 things stuck out immediately. It was his $4,000 tax credit for every person who wants to go to college. I don't know how much you guys have read about that, but having campaigned all over the country, we've been meeting folks who have 3 or 4 brothers and sisters, and folks are having to decide which one in the family gets to go to college. That's not acceptable to Barack, nor I think should it be acceptable to any of us. Under the senator's plan, if you've got 10 brothers and sisters, and all 10 of you get into college, each of you will receive a $4,000 tax credit per year to go to school. Because of the story I told you about with my friend in Texas, that was hugely significant for me. The second was that the senator is the only major presidential candidate to have opposed the Iraq War from the beginning. I don't know how much of the story you guys have heard about that, but Senator Obama was running for re-election in the Illinois State Senate when the Iraq War was starting up. And he read all the data on the Iraq War, knew why it was a bad decision, told his own aides this is the wrong decision for our foreign policy, for our national security. It'll put us in debt. It's wrong to send our troops into harm's way for no reason. And he said to his aides, I want to speak out against the Iraq War. And his own aides said, Barack, if you speak out against the war is testing at an 80 or 85% approval rating among Democrats and Republicans. If you speak out against this war, you're never going to get reelected. And Barack looked at his own aides and said something to the effect of, if lying about foreign policy is the only way to get reelected, then I don't want to get reelected. And he did go to an anti-war rally, and he did speak out against the war. And of course, the infamous quote since then is the senator saying, I'm not opposed to all wars, I'm just opposed to a dumb war. Kind of succinct to knowing what we know now, but I think that considering that the other 2 major presidential candidates voted to authorize and wage this war, it really does say something to have somebody before us who has had the foreign policy insight to know then what the rest of us know now. And I had a lot of respect for that, especially those of us who have friends serving in the military in Iraq or Afghanistan. To know that you've got somebody with that type of insight was pretty significant for me. And then the third was really simple, and that went back to my senior year in college. I had a buddy who, we were in a big lecture hall last semester of senior year, and he had to get eyeglasses to see the board. And he was on financial aid, and he did all the math and realized that he couldn't afford both textbooks and glasses for the semester. And so he had to make this decision, well, if it's an 8 a.m. class, which you should never take, but if it's an 8 a.m. class, and if I show up at 7:30 and sit in the front row, will I still be able to see the board so that I can buy my school books? And if the answer is no, then will there be enough copies of these books on reserve at the library during finals week if I do get glasses? Or if I get glasses, how much would it cost to photocopy every single page of the book? Would that be cheaper than actually buying the book, and would I have money left over? This is an insane decision that somebody in the world's richest country would have to make. And it was simply because of lack of fair access to not just money for education, but access to health care. And when he was an Illinois state senator, Senator Obama gave 150,000 kids and their parents health care by making Democrats and Republicans sit down together. This is something that none of the other candidates, of course, have done. I think they've talked a lot about what should or shouldn't be done about health care over the years, but they really haven't been able to get anything accomplished. And so to know that he's already done that, and to know that he has a hugely successful record of bringing Democrats and Republicans together, I thought, all right, I want to go and volunteer for this guy. And so I said, all right, I'll sign up and go to the first state to have their version of the primary, which was Iowa. That was back in January. So I signed up in October, and in November I said, all right, I'm going to spend 2 days out there. So I spent 2 days in Iowa. After a day and a half, I'd met these amazing Obama volunteers and staff members and saw that his own senior policy staffers from DC and Chicago were knocking on doors and making phone calls next to the 16-year-old high school intern who couldn't even vote. And that was really moving to me. So I said, all right, I'm going to stay. So I stayed for a month and a half. And my disclaimer is that there was also a writer's strike going on in LA. So I had no job. So it's not like I was making any huge sacrifices. I was unemployed. But something interesting came out of all these articles that we were reading on the writer's strike, and that had a lot to do with the election, I think. That has to do with folks who are in this, what's called the youth demographic, right? If you're between the ages of 18 and 35, then you fit this group of people that, you know, movie studios want to sell things to, that iTunes wants you to buy downloads off of, that Coke and Pepsi and Gatorade and vitamin water, they want you to buy their products. I don't think it's incidental that this young spending demographic is also what's called the youth vote. And something really interesting happened the last 4 years that has never happened before in our country, and that has to do with our generation and the internet. 3 websites in particular, MySpace, Facebook, and YouTube come to mind. YouTube's a free service, obviously. How many of you have seen at least one video in the last week on YouTube? I'm just making sure that, you know, this is going to make sense. So YouTube's free to use, but YouTube, the company, makes $7.5 million every month in advertising revenue. MySpace appeals to our generation almost exclusively. It was started not too long ago, and MySpace recently sold for $580 million to a company called News Corp, which is one of the world's largest, most powerful media conglomerates. Facebook is probably the best example of what I'm trying to say. Facebook was started a couple of years ago by 2 college kids in their 20s in Boston. These guys are still in their 20s, and Facebook was recently valued at $1.6 billion. Now, we read this and we thought, wait a second, this is wealth that our generation has collectively amassed for our own peers by sitting in front of our computers and tagging photos and messaging your friends, inviting them to events like this. And I think a lot of us realized, well, wait a second, if we can create billions of dollars in wealth for our own peers just by sitting in front of our computers, think about the power that we have to change the face of a presidential election. And not just one presidential election, but truly the way in which politics operate in this country to begin with. You have a hugely significant role in front of you right now, and an incredible opportunity to register not just yourself but other folks before Monday, and then to go and vote. And a couple of weeks ago we were doing an event in Wisconsin with another surrogate for the senator. Her name's Kerry Washington. She's an actress, incredibly well-spoken, and in the car we were talking about something that really stuck with me. And she said, do you realize that if folks in positions of power who have been part of political families for generations or who have spent so much time in Washington, D.C., do you realize that if they really wanted everyone to have a fair vote in this country, then Election Day would be a national holiday? And that's something that stuck with me because all across the country we've been meeting folks who maybe hadn't been registered to vote before. They may have been registered lifelong Republicans and are now coming over to support Senator Obama. This really is a huge movement for change. And the reason I bring that up is I would love for you not just to register to vote, not just to register 5 or 10 of your friends, but to really go out into your communities in the city in the next 2 days. You know, if you can spend 2 hours tomorrow going and registering folks to vote who may not have otherwise had the opportunity, That's going to make a huge difference for your community and for other folks who maybe don't have the means or the good fortune that you do. Just by being on a college campus, you have an incredible amount of privilege, and I would love to see that kind of being used for something good for once. I'll tell you a quick story, and then I think we can open it up for questions if you guys have any. 3 days before the Iowa caucuses, that's their version of the primary, in Des Moines, there were about 150 of us in Senator Obama's volunteer office. It was 10:30 at night. We were finishing up all our phone calls, putting together what are called walk packets, where you go and knock on people's doors, give them information, answer questions they have. This guy walks into the office, and he was probably about this high, must have been about 70 years old, with a cowboy hat and cowboy boots on. And he was introduced, his name was Mr. Lamb. He was introduced, I believe, as one of the heads of the Iowa Farmers Union. And he asked us to stop working for a couple of minutes. He wanted us to give him his completely undivided attention. He had recently, for the past few months actually at that point, been working with the senator, and he said he wanted us to know that as long as he can remember in his long life as an Iowan, every 4 years politicians had descended on the state of Iowa, because Iowa is the first to have their voice heard, and Iowa starts this momentum. And he said every 4 years these politicians come, and the politicians make promises to family farmers, and these politicians talk about health care and the environment, and then the election happens, and the politicians leave, and another 4 years go by, and a new set of politicians come through. And he said, before you go back to work, I want you to look up the definition of the word politician. And then look up the definition of the word statesman. Because this is the first time in my life that I've had the chance to know a true statesman in Senator Obama. And he turned around and he left the room, and it was completely silent. We all had tears in our eyes. And we all looked up those two definitions between politician and statesman. And the reason that I'm telling you that story is because I would love for you to do the same thing. You only have 2 days before you can register folks to vote and really have a say in their government and their daily lives. And you have just about a month to actually make sure that folks vote for the choice now in front of us to really elect a true statesman to be the next president of the United States. We've already proven the cynics wrong. We've already shown them how much money we can make for our peers. And if you don't want to do this just to continue to prove these cynics wrong, I really, truly hope that you'll register folks to vote and sign up to volunteer for folks like my friend in Texas, who turned down that job at Halliburton and is still making minimum wage and has still not been able to afford a college education. Please go out there and get involved, even if you can only donate an hour of your time or 2 hours of your time. It really will make a huge difference for folks who are not as fortunate as those of us in the room right now. So thank you very much for having us here. I really appreciate it. And now some questions.
The cow will answer.
That will all answer?
Cal,
Yes, sir.
just to get this out on the table, I'm a registered Republican from
Sure.
my beautiful home state of New Jersey.
Nice.
Exit 135 off of Parkway. It seems like you may be counting your chickens before they hatch. If this evil wench of a woman...
Wait. Let's not talk about anyone like
Okay,
that, please.
okay.
Yeah.
What happens if Obama does not get the Democratic ticket? What will you do?
I would have to think about that when it happens. In terms of counting chickens before they hatch, thankfully we don't have to make that decision just yet. Hopefully we won't have to. You know, it's obviously an incredibly close race. That's why we're here. I know that the senator has an incredible amount of respect for John McCain and for Hillary Clinton. I think they've run some great campaigns and certainly have done some great things in their lives. But there's a huge distinction and a huge choice between those candidates. And I think that's why we're here, to make sure that folks understand those differences so that they can vote for what we believe is the right choice. And we've certainly got not just independents like myself, but scores of Republicans like you who have come out to support. Pennsylvania, just to do an aside real quick, is a closed primary, which means that if you are an independent like me or a Republican and you do decide that you'd like to vote for Senator Obama, you need to re-register as a Democrat by Monday. You can re-register as a Republican after the election, on April 23rd when you wake up. If you'd like to go back to your party affiliation, you're more than welcome to. But I mean, to very simply answer that question, it's an incredibly close race, and I have so much. I'm so hopeful for the right decisions that I don't even want to have to think that way.
I think that the reason that we're here is because we believe that, we don't want to answer that question, But the other thing is that I think all three of us are less interested in telling you who to vote for than we are in telling you to vote.
No, I want to tell them who to vote for now.
I want to tell you to vote for it too, but I'm more interested that you formulate your own opinion, that you have your own position, that you know what issues are important to you, and that you do the work and the research that's necessary to make sure that those positions are rooted in the platforms of the candidate that you think most appropriately suit them. Barack Obama. Anybody else? Yeah.
Last question. It's going to be all three of you, but I know Al, you were on there, came by, I welcome you too. What is your take on the media's kind of portrayal of this election and kind of like not really focusing as much on issues, but on, I don't want to say superficial, but on important, almost not as important things as this thing as with red and white and cabinet members such as Ferraro coming out and saying things like that.
I'll share a quick story that's really going to address that. My feeling on that was really summarized pretty well, I think, by the senator in January. We were doing a big rally for him in Los Angeles, and this was right after one of his opponents had accused him of lying about knowing he wanted to be president because of a kindergarten essay he wrote. And I remember reading this online, and I thought it was an Onion article. And then I saw it on the BBC. What? So anyway, this was a couple of days after this accusation had come out, and the senator was talking about his education plan. And he went off on this tangent in this speech in front of 5,000 people, and he said, some of you may have heard that one of my opponents, she said that I lied about knowing I wanted to be president because of an essay I wrote in kindergarten. I guess I should come clean about some other stuff I did in kindergarten. Once, when I was walking down the hallway, I pulled on a little girl's ponytail and liked it. And we were sitting in the audience going, that's not part of the speech, right? Why did he just say that? And you realize one of the reasons he probably said that was nobody who really has things truly at stake cares about this mudslinging. What we do care about is how to solve the environmental crisis, how to bring our friends home from Iraq, how to make sure that my friend doesn't have to make a decision between eyeglasses and textbooks. These are the things that affect us. And so what better way to make sure that the media can't talk about mudslinging than to just completely deflate it with a simple joke. And that's what he did. He made sure that we could actually focus on the issues. He made that joke, and the rest of the speech was talking about the issues, which is what we really want to focus on. So that's my response to when the media kind of delves into that. They would have loved nothing more than to talk about the kindergarten essay for the next 4 weeks, but they weren't able to because of the way that the senator kind of brushed it aside.
If you're trying to reach someone that has never participated in politics before, what would be the one way that you think you could hook them into the whole process and get them really excited about it?
Sharp stick.
I think that we can all look at the climate of the world that we live in and recognize that we're on a really dangerous path right now. And I think that every voice counts. And I think that being able to engage somebody in the fact that what Barack Obama, you're talking about the process of politics in general, but I'm talking about the process as filtered through this candidate. He represents something that's different. Comes from a community base. He has made huge strides with lobby reform in both the Illinois and the U.S. Senate. He's trying to really, really bring the government back to the people so that the kind of apathy that we've become accustomed to accept and expect is really sort of done away with. And that's what I think you can really grab somebody with, is somebody's unwillingness to get involved is a huge symptom of the larger problem of the apathy that has a hold of our country. And I think that as young people, we represent the sort of diametric opposite to that, which is that we are the ones that are going to inherit this. We are the ones that are going to be responsible for the decision ultimately. And I think that to engage people on that level, at least in the couple instances that I've had, has been really effective. It's hard when you're dealing with people of our parents' generation who are so steeped in the sort of institutionalized nature that politics has held for the past 50 years. But I feel like the world has changed so rapidly in just our lifetime. Think about the things that weren't around when we were kids, I still remember 8 tracks. I don't know, that might set me a little bit apart from most of you guys. I didn't really have many of them, but I remember what they looked like. But you know, there's been we live in a different world, right? And it's a world that we can understand better than our parents. It's a world that we can understand better than a lot of other people, and I think that that's something that will draw people into understanding the importance of this particular election, as opposed to other ones that we've seen.
Really quickly, if you're talking about somebody who's of our generation,
Right.
There's really no denying the role that the youth vote has played, not just in Senator Obama's campaign, but overall in politics this time around. If you look at Iowa alone, the average age of votership in Iowa in 2004 for their caucus was 65 years of age. And this past January 3rd, youth voter turnout increased by 150% compared to what it was in '04. So people are mobilizing. This is the first time, I think, that we've had lack of health insurance, lack of access to education, and friends fighting overseas. I mean, this is the first time we've seen a lot of those things at the same time, and I think our generation is finally saying we need to take a stand, and like you were saying, just vote in general. Make sure you're an active participant.
And I think you also have a candidate who, as he exhibited in his speech last Tuesday, was it? I've heard from a lot of people subsequent. I got emails from people who said to me that speech finally pushed them. They weren't sure, or they hadn't decided yet. And I think when you just watch, if you can just get whoever it is you might be talking about to watch some YouTube videos of him there. Just the way he puts himself out there in a way that it's almost unprecedented for a politician of any generation to do. I think it's to me, there's an electricity there just watching him. If you don't have the mask and then the eyes behind the mask that seem to be thinking, taking temperatures, calculating, thinking. To me, you have a sense of that what you're hearing is the result of someone's having really thought about what it is that he's now saying.
And that ultimately his message, because I agree with that totally, that his message really does come from him. You know, that there's not the idea of all this machination behind the scenes and people writing and telling him what to say. I mean, it really does feel like, I'm sure he works with people on how to present it, but it really, really comes from an organic and intrinsic place, which does set him apart.
I think those of us that have had the chance to spend some time with him, I think one of the more remarkable things was to see that, he really is the same person in a room of 4 people as he is in a room of 4,000. And I don't say that lightly. Spending time in LA, that politicians come through all the time and do these fundraisers, and even though I may not have donated to them, I go because I have an interest in politics, and I see them speak. And it's always amazing to me that when CNN and AP and ABC News leave the room, these people are completely different in real life. And so to know that Senator Obama is really the same person, in front of and without the glare of cameras, is something that I think you should know. Yeah. No one else? Yes.
I don't really have a question, but since someone's asking. I just want to say that, first of all, so lucky. We're from Ohio, and we missed you. We were in Ohio, so we're here now. But we really appreciate you guys, because there's so many other things that you should be doing right now. And you're here, and this is just impacting everyone, and I'm sure everyone here in this room. So thank you.
Well, I would argue. I think you could be doing much better things too. Honestly, I think it says a lot to the fact that there are so many people in the room taking.
Saturday, it's a holiday weekend. Yeah. It really does. I mean, I've been so inspired, and so that's the thing. This is my first trip. I've been traveling for a week, and just in Pennsylvania, I got a call last week asking if I would come to my home state and spend some time here. And I was eager to jump on a plane twice because I had to go back to LA in the middle of the week to work one day, and then came back on Thursday. So, I feel inspired by you, by the people that I've met along the way. Every college that we've gone to, some of them are in parts of Pennsylvania that I had never been to before, and I grew up here. And whether it's a big university like this or a tiny little college where there's 50 people in a room, the intelligence, the inspiration and the insight that the young people that I've been encountering, I mean, it just sends me like I don't want to do anything else for a while, So thank you. I totally echo Cal's sentiments. Thank you.
Anyone undecided who has some questions? You're certainly welcome to ask them. They haven't cut us off yet, so.
As entertainers, does it worry you that lately the media has been affecting politics and certain celebrities have been getting involved where they might be uneducated?
I mean, I feel like.
Are you talking about somebody I may have debated on Larry King? I mean that respectfully.
I mean, the media involvement has definitely troubled me a lot. Especially, it's one of the things that got me more involved. You know, when I first was presented with this election, the idea of this election, I was really just concerned with getting a Democrat in the White House. I didn't really put a face to that Democrat early on. And then the more I saw the way that people are pitting themselves against one another, and I feel like, you know, Senator Obama represents somebody that doesn't actively participate in that behavior. As his speech on Tuesday demonstrated, he's somebody that's completely willing to step up nose to nose if he's called to do that, but I don't feel like he's initiated that kind of behavior. I think that we live in an age of, you know, instant information, instant technology, instant entertainment, which ultimately translates into instant distraction. And media manipulation and the sensationalization of the media just serves to disconnect us from ourselves and from each other. And I feel like, you know, that is really troubling that we live in an age of that. But I think that these kinds of conversations are exactly what combat it, you know. And I think he represents somebody that's definitely stands on the ground to combat it. And in terms of entertainers getting involved, I mean, I feel like that's a I don't know, that's a dicier question. I feel like I wish more of my actor friends and writer friends and director friends and producer friends would give up some of their time and lend some of their efforts to what's going on, you know, because I think it's actually really important. I do think it's a responsibility, if you're going to do it, to educate yourself and to inspire other people to get educated. But I feel like in terms of lending one's visibility to generate a greater debate about where we're living and what we're doing, I think that's kind of something that excites me, and that's part of the reason why I'm here.
Stop yelling.
Can you just tell us more stories? Like, there's a lot. I'm saying someone who's rallying my friends and trying to get people involved, and if I can go into a room and say, hey, this is what happened in Iowa when a union member said he's a statesman, not a politician, I think that has a lot of power for someone that wouldn't have that immediate access to statesman.
Sure. Of course, now that I'm put on the spot, I can't think of it. Let me brainstorm. Well,
do you guys know about what he did in Illinois with the videotape confessions? Do you know that story?
No.
So they had a series of embarrassing for the state exonerations on death row, where these guys, prisoners who have been held on death row for a long time, were exonerated. It became clear that the state of Illinois' death penalty mechanism was completely dysfunctional. It was in terrible shape, and nobody really quite knew what to do about it. Obviously, it's very unpopular, generally speaking, in this country to advocate abolishing the death penalty. Barack decided one thing that would help would be if the police were required to videotape confessions when they're interrogations, when they're interrogating suspects, that there should just be a video camera there. Then there's no subsequent question about was the confession unfairly obtained. It's all there, it's open, it's transparent, and this is, you know, something I think is one of the most important things about Barack Obama is the degree to which he does stand for transparency, for openness, for letting people see how things are done, how laws are made, how, you know, decisions get made. This was the most unpopular idea anyone had ever floated in the state of Illinois. When he came out with this, the police were against it. The governor of the state was against it. The Republicans in the state house were against it. The Democrats in the state house were against it because they thought if they came out in favor of it, it would make them look soft on crime. Everybody was against it, and even the death penalty advocate, the attorneys and people working for death penalty for people on death row, they were against it because it was one of the few tools they felt they had to get people exonerated or to have their death penalty at least reconsidered. Barack went to work one congressperson at a time, one state representative at a time. He sat down and talked to each and every one of them. He talked to the police, he talked to the governor, and he just laid it out why this was a sensible, common sense thing to do. It wasn't going to hurt anybody. It was only going to help. And I guess now I can't remember. I think the vote, if it wasn't unanimous, it was 35-1. The governor signed the bill. So in the end, by virtue of not demagoguing, not standing up and making speeches, not trying to scare people, nothing like that, just sitting down and talking one at a time to each of the people, he was able to turn this from the most unpopular thing anybody had ever tried to do in the state of Illinois to something that was virtually unanimous. That really impressed me.
One of the things that I was doing when we were driving around the state was I would be on my iPhone sort of from point to point at times and reading articles and stuff. And one of the articles that I read chronicled, you can find it on, I think it's boston.com. It came from the Boston Globe, and it's a 10-page article about his journey, basically. And I was literally in the car. I was like, I was reading it out loud to Nicole, who was driving, and to see how meteoric and how powerful his journey has been from the year 2000 when he mounted an unsuccessful campaign to unseat Bobby Rush in the Congress, which was a devastating blow, absolutely devastating blow. Michelle Obama was like, you gotta get out, you gotta get a job, you've gotta make money. They had, you know, between the two of them from their law school experience, they had like, you know, I think they said that their combined student loan debt was more than the mortgage on their condos. I mean, it was like insane. And so there was this, you know, tension period of like, you know, you can't do this, we have kids, we need to make this life for yourself. And in 2002, he just sort of started testing the waters, and he just started putting it out there. And this is an amazing article about how really, you know, the Democratic fundraising support system wasn't really even sure that they were behind him. And he had a Sunday brunch at one of the primary fundraisers' houses. And she said, she accounts in this article, that when they sat down at the brunch, she was like, because he was going to mount a campaign for Senate, the Senate seat that he ultimately won in 2004. This was in 2002, he had this brunch with her. And she was like, you can't do this, like, you just can't do it. It's not, you know, you got to be careful, like this happened, and so unsuccessful. And she said at the end of the brunch, she not only was she behind him, but she organized the momentum. She became his chief fundraiser. She mounted the campaign, and from that point, from 2004, that's only 4 years. For a freshman senator from 2004 to be the very likely Democratic nominee for president in 2008, it's unbelievable. And to read this article and to see for yourselves the sort of meteoric rise of his inspiration of people, his unification of people, and his persuasion of people from a place of true integrity and true belief in where he stands and who he is just, I was like, you know, so moved in the car. I was like on my way to Edinburgh, just like crazy. So I encourage you guys to look up that article. It's in the Boston Globe, but you can find it online at boston.com. And I believe the title of the article is Early Defeat something, sends him on meteoric rise, something like this. So you can find it and read it for yourselves, and that's certainly a story that was recounted over 10 pages that really inspired me.
We're just going to do 2 more questions.
How realistic is to actually end the war in Iraq, considering the strong growing power of arms manufacturers, the oil companies, and also the fact that Iraq is not in a completely stable position politically or socially right now? So, you know, I didn't support what the U.S. first invaded Iraq, but then now that you're in pulling out parity or if not considering the repercussions and the devastating, unless you just care about, you're going to see the life of the troops.
Well, you bring up 2 actually really interesting points. One is about the power of the lobby organizations and the special interests in Washington. The other is about an actual commitment to removing troops from Iraq. Barack Obama has a really impressive legislative history in both the Illinois State Senate and the United States Senate for initiating lobby reform bills. These are bills that start to diminish the power of lobbying organizations. He's the only candidate in this election that has not accepted any money from special interest organizations in Washington. He's the only one that has committed to not having a lobbyist in his White House when he's elected. This absolutely is, for me, the first step on leveling the playing field for the American people. Any other candidate that gets this, that wins this election, the game's over before it started, because they've all accepted contributions from these huge $1 million, or the oil industry, the energy industry. I mean, it's like the health industry, pharmaceutical companies. I mean, these people spend, between the insurance companies and the pharmaceutical companies, they spent $1 billion on political investments and on political campaigns in the past 5 years, or yeah, I'm not exactly sure how long, but $1 billion. Like, I don't have $1 billion. I don't think anybody in this room has $1 billion. And so how is it that our best interests can be kept at the forefront of politicians' minds when this money is running interference and these lobbying organizations are running interference? So step one is he's removing that from the equation and leveling the playing field on that regard. And step two is he's the only candidate that's committed to an actual timetable of withdrawal in conjunction with working with Iraqi officials from every level to find new accords on their constitution that allows them to take more power over their government and over their military. So he said that by the time he gets into office, he's going to start ending the war responsibly and immediately by removing 1 to 2 combat brigades a month for the year and a half after he's elected. And he's the only candidate that's willing to do that, that's willing to say, we will make this happen, we'll start it the day I take office, and we'll find the ways in which we can exercise it prudently and responsibly. And that sets him apart completely as well.
And there is a humanitarian component to that as well. The senator has said very succinctly, I'd like to go, stand in front of the United Nations General Assembly and say, America is back. Now, what that means, aside from sounding great, has a very key, the key policy component of that with regards to Iraq is that while we're withdrawing these combat troops gradually over the 16 months after which he takes office, we do want to make sure that there are multilateral, not unilateral, multilateral humanitarian forces that are in place in Iraq for the support of Iraqi civilians, so that other state entities like Iran or Syria can't come in and destabilize what should be a democratic Iraqi society, so that stateless entities like Al-Qaeda can't come in and continue to destabilize Iraq for Iraqi civilians. So the plan is extremely detailed. It's not what folks would call a cut and run strategy. It's absolutely not that. It is a gradual combat withdrawal with a humanitarian component. And you reminded me of something in terms of the lobbyist money. You summed it up really well. I mean, basically the only folks who Senator Obama is going to owe favors to as President Obama is us, the people that voted for him. He's not going to owe any favors to any of these federal lobbyist folks. And I would urge you to look at the ways in which that impacts policy. When you're looking at something like healthcare policy, for example, all the Democratic candidates did have universal healthcare plans. I know, John Edwards did as well. It's the main distinction between Senators Clinton and Obama's plans are the issue of what's called a mandate. Senator Clinton's plan has a mandate which essentially is going to force folks into buying particular types of healthcare without regard to cost. Now, most of us know, just like my friend who couldn't afford glasses, folks who don't have healthcare because they can't afford it, not because they don't want it. So to have this sort of forced mandate, Senator Obama believes is going to be completely ineffective. And the fact that he doesn't take federal lobbyist money in his presidential campaign means that when you sit down to formulate healthcare policy, you've got this round table, which literally exists from what I'm told. And folks are sitting around this table, and you'll have someone from the nurses union and a doctors group and a patients' rights group. And you'll also have 1 or 2 folks from a for-profit pharmaceutical company or healthcare industry. But unlike other candidates, these folks won't be able to buy every single seat at this healthcare policy table under Barack Obama's administration. And that is such a key distinction between him and John McCain and Senator Clinton with regards to healthcare policy, the environment, the war in Iraq. And if you would look at his track record in the U.S. Senate, bipartisan especially in the U.S. Senate and in the Illinois State Senate, I think that distinction couldn't be more clear. So I would urge you all actually to look at the website. There are 2 different versions you can look at, either pa.barackobama.com specific to Pennsylvania or barackobama.com/issues. There's a big drop-down menu library full of policy papers that have anything you could possibly want to know. And that was, all right, so we have time for 1 more round. Oh, now 3 people raised their hand. All right, go ahead, you call.
So since you guys are actors, one of my favorite movies is Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. And it sounds like what you're saying is that there are actually a lot of similarities between Senator Obama and Mr. Smith. And as far as he's a pro-Trump politics. And so what I want to know is that politics is obviously an ugly business. What do you guys see in him that convinces you he will be able to carry that through his 4 years or 8 years of people like that?
Let me just preface by saying I always hesitate comparing fact and fiction. So, and I haven't seen Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. I don't watch a lot of movies, sorry. I read books, that's it. If you see my apartment, you'd be horrified, yeah. You want to?
Well, part of it is what you just said about lobbyists.
Yeah.
I mean, lobbyists and not being indebted to lobbyists. And you can get a lot more done flying in the face of lobbyists if you don't feel like they actually you're in their pocket. And I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
The issue of integrity, I think, is a big one. And you can find countless examples from folks who know the senator well. Even if you've only spent a little bit of time with him, or you look at his record on how he was, for example, able to accomplish death penalty reform by transcending this Democrat versus Republican divide. I mean, as Michael pointed out, everyone was against this idea from the beginning, whether you were Democrat or Republican, and it turned out to be the best idea. So to know that he's got the integrity to stick with things, I mean, and to know it's real. I'll give you a small example. This was, by the way, there were no TV cameras around. There were only a handful of people. The night that the senator won the state of Iowa, there were a bunch of us in this. There was this little room beneath that huge stadium where you saw his historic speech. And he came in, and we were just all talking for a little while. And one of the things that I was doing was reaching out to college and high school students. And the senator said to me, he had tears in his eyes, and he said, "I'm so proud that they all came out and voted, and that they voted in such huge numbers." And he was fully aware of the fact that they may not all have voted for him, but the fact that they did vote and did finally take some sort of initiative in their own lives, a very simple act of registering and going to vote, moved him so deeply. And this was not for any camera, it wasn't for any reporter, there was no one in the room. Something else he does that has never been a news story because he doesn't want it to be is he's requested from his staff a randomly generated list of people who have donated the basic minimum of $25 to his campaign. These are folks who don't have the means to donate hundreds or thousands of dollars. And he has this list, and when he's got downtime, he calls them. And he said, "Hey, this is Senator Obama, and I just wanted to thank you for donating $25. Because you know that folks who have only donated $25 are, students, or they're not very well off. And scrounging together $25 is a huge thing for these folks. So, I mean, this is the way that he conducts his life, is what I'm trying to say. These are the things that are deeply important to him behind the scenes in his own life. These are the things that you'll probably never read about on CNN or on the Huffington Post or anything like that. And I want you to know about them if you're asking the question on how he's set apart from different folks and how you know he's going to have that integrity when he's in the White House, because simply he has it already.
I don't know anything to add to that. How can I top that, right?
All right, well, let's.
What's up? This is Zachary Quinto from Heroes and from Star Trek, and you're watching cmuTV. I heart CMU.
Absolutely, man. Anytime.
Hey, this is Cal Penn. I'm here for Senator Barack Obama, and you're watching cmuTV.